Among the factors that affect a student's ability to learn, one of the most important is their teacher. But because teacher quality is difficult to observe, it can be hard for schools to identify and screen for effective individuals. Indeed, observable characteristics such as experience, college grades, credentials, and interview scores have been shown to be poor predictors of future performance and to explain little of the variation in teacher quality. Can performance pay help solve this problem? While flat contracts pay a fixed salary, performance contracts tie teachers' pay to a particular metric such that better performance on this dimension leads to higher compensation. Other research has shown that these incentives can improve teacher performance, but this paper studies the impact on sorting. If teachers know they are high ability, and, therefore, can expect to earn more under performance pay, they may sort into schools that offer these contracts. This means that even without observing ability, schools may be able to screen for high-quality teachers. To gauge whether performance pay induces positive sorting, the authors implemented a large-scale experiment across nearly 300 private schools in urban Pakistan. To measure ability, they calculate teacher value added at baseline before any intervention. Value added is a measure of a teacher's contribution to student learning and is derived by estimating an individual's impact on test scores after controlling for other variables. This figure shows the distribution of baseline value added in this study's sample. Having a teacher with a 1 standard deviation higher value added for 1 year is associated with a 0.15 standard deviation higher student test score. So, do teachers with higher value added prefer performance pay? In phase 1 of the experiment, teachers were asked to choose between different contracts for the following year. One would provide a flat raise, the other would tie the size of the raise to performance. To incentivize teachers to respond truthfully, the authors informed them that in some subset of schools, teachers would receive the actual contract they chose. This figure plots the distribution of value added among teachers who chose flat versus performance pay, and shows that those who chose performance pay have higher value added. On average, the difference is equivalent to a 0.05 standard deviation difference in test scores. So, when given the choice, high value-added teachers are more likely to select a performance pay contract. But does this translate into actual job choices? To test this, Phase 2 of the experiment randomized contracts across the 243 schools where teachers' choices had not been implemented. All teachers employed in treatment schools received a performance contract, and all those employed in control schools received a flat contract, regardless of their stated preference from Phase 1. Crucially, after the treatment and control assignments were announced, teachers were not restricted in their ability to move between schools. Thus, the authors estimate the effect of performance pay on job choice by tracking where teachers choose to work in the following year. And they find that the composition of teachers in performance pay schools is better after 1 year. At baseline, the distribution of teacher quality is identical between treatment and control schools. This is consistent with the treatment being randomly assigned. But 1 year later, after teachers have had a chance to move, baseline value added is, on average, 0.022 standard deviations higher at performance pay schools. This change is driven by high value-added teachers moving from flat to performance pay schools, and low value-added teachers moving in the opposite direction. In other words, there is positive sorting on teacher ability. Over the year of the intervention, schools with performance pay attracted better teachers relative to schools with flat pay. But there is also a second dimension of positive sorting. This figure shows that while the average effect of performance pay on student test scores is positive when averaged across all teachers, this effect is driven by teachers who chose performance pay in Phase 1. In other words, in addition to positive sorting on ability, there is positive sorting on behavioral responses. Individuals who respond more strongly to performance incentives are more likely to choose performance pay. There is also no relationship between the size of this behavioral effect and baseline value added. That is, high ability and high behavioral effect teachers are not the same individuals. Finally, the results imply that teachers have private information that exceeds what schools can generally observe. First, all the results hold even after controlling for principals' evaluations of teachers. This indicates that sorting behavior provides a signal of teacher type that goes above and beyond what principals already know. Second, this figure shows the relationship between actual and predicted teacher value added. Starting from a predictive model that uses only a teacher's age, experience, and credentials, adding principal evaluations does lead to improvements. However, further adding teachers' contract choices triples the predictive power of the model. Put another way, contract decisions encompass information about teacher ability that substantially exceeds what is typically available to schools. In conclusion, this paper shows that performance pay induces positive sorting, and this behavior conveys information about teachers that exceeds what schools can observe. In this setting, the authors estimate that sorting accounts for roughly half of the total effect of performance pay on student test scores. This suggests there can be large gains for schools, and employers more generally, from policies that leverage employees' private information about their type and ability. To read more on this topic, you can check out the paper's references to other related work. These include papers on teacher quality, those studying the effects of contract type on teacher selection, and finally, research on performance pay in education, as well as in other sectors.